What's going on, guys? I'm Leah B. Jackson, and today I'm here with my pro gamer buddy, Greg Idra Fields.
Hey, Leah.
Hey. Today we're going to be bringing you the best way to play Gazlowe in Heroes of the Storm. All set, Greg?
Oh, all set.
Okay. All right, so here we are in try mode with Gazlowe. Why don't you tell us a little bit about him and his abilities?
Gazlowe is a funky specialist hero. Has a lot of really unique abilities. He's very focused on area control, and he's very good at jungling, but that's just kind of a byproduct of his abilities. It's kind of hard to describe him, but he has a lot of different strong things that he can do within a game. He can do a lot of area control, a lot of pushing, a lot of jungling. It's very, very diverse. The only thing he's bad at is very dynamic team fights and head-on fights. His passive is called Salvager, and what that does is when you place a turret, or when a building dies, that happens as well, you can deconstruct it by activating the D, and then it's hard to see there, but there's this little bolt on the ground, and if you walk over that, it picks it up, and that restores some mana quickly, and it also reduces your cooldown by a pretty significant %. So that's a very, very helpful passive that allows him to spam his abilities much more frequently. And by the time you get to the late game, you can pretty much always have your ultimate up despite a 90-second cooldown just because of this cooldown reduction from that. So very, very powerful passive there. And now his active abilities, his Q is his rocket turret, and that just places a turret. You can have up to 2 charges at once, a 1-second delay, and you can place another one. That can be upgraded, but for now we're on the 2. And you can see that places those. It just does damage. It's pretty tanky. It's good at absorbing damage, good at dealing damage, and this is your main jungling tool. We'll look at how to deal with that later. But really, you're just going to place those. They can absorb damage, they deal damage. Very multi-purpose. Your second ability is your Death Laser. They spelled wrong. I don't know why. And you see that looks gigantic, but it's balanced out by the fact that it has a very long charge time. You can fire it immediately, but it has a very small AoE. It does very little damage at first, but if you charge up all the way, it does gigantic AoE and quite a bit of damage. It's not the most practical ability in team fights. More often than not, you'll be using that to push a lane or do ranged harassment, but sometimes you will get a good enough setup that you can get a fully charged one off in a team fight. However, it's not worth focusing your talents on, really focusing too much time or attention on. It's really just not the most amazing ability. However, his E, his Explodium Charge, places a very large AoE stun. However, the thing is, it has a countdown. It's a 2.5-second delay after placement, which makes it very, very hard to land, except for the fact that you have this wonderful ultimate called the Graviton Bomb 3000. And so what you're going to do is you're going to drop a bomb, you're going to wait about a second, then you're going to place the Graviton Bomb on top of it, and the bot is very uncooperative, so we don't get to see exactly what happens. But in theory, the Graviton Bomb pulls everything into the to your E-Bomb, which then stuns them. And you can actually stack those stuns because there's a talent that allows you to have 2 E charges at once. So it's pretty hard to actually demonstrate this on the fly, especially in this kind of situation. But it actually makes you one of the best teamfight heroes in the game. It's absolutely fantastic setup for any kind. Of team fight stuff. And here, just to demonstrate, you won't get the stun lock here, but you see how that all pulls it into the center, and it does that in a pretty gigantic AoE. So if you hit a good one, you can pull 4 or 5 heroes into a stun, set them up perfectly for any other AoE your team has, and it's just incredibly powerful. But that is pretty much your sole contribution to team fights. So you really have to focus on getting that combo off correctly. It can be kind of difficult to do. So that's the downside of the hero, but if you do it well, it's absolutely amazing.
All right, now let's take a look at his talents.
At level 1, you have pretty much one talent. This one increases the cooldown reduction granted by Scrap to 9 over 3 seconds, and you pretty much have to take this. Everything you are in the late game comes down to your ultimate, your Graviton Bomb, and using this, spamming turrets and then salvaging them, means that you have essentially no cooldown on the ultimate, so absolutely have to get that one. There's no real question. Cooldown reduction is just too important. At level 4, I almost always get Minion Killer. The big part of your early game is either jungling or pushing, either of which Minion Killer helps a lot. And the big thing is, while you're jungling, you are a little bit exposed. If the enemy has a Zeratul, they send him after you. If he catches you in the act, he's probably going to kill you. So being able to clear those camps with Minion Killer is absolutely crucial. A couple other utility options here, but nothing as good in all-purpose as Minion Killer. And all-purpose with Gazlowe is really important, because there's several different things you have to do at any given point in the early game. And Minion Killer covers all of them. At level 7, I generally get Rocket Turret XL, which turrets can hit up to 2 additional targets for 50% of normal turret damage. Again, this helps with both pushing and jungling. Obviously, night camps, you have 4 different targets. You get that damage spread out, you clear them much quicker. And then pushing is just additional damage, particularly against minions. Really helps you push a lot. Everything else here is a little bit iffy. Slow your targets. You don't really use the turrets for team fighting. It doesn't help too much against heroes. Mule, first aid, pretty lackluster in general. At level 10, of course, the Graviton Bomb. This is what makes the hero. It's absolutely massive. Maybe the best team fight setup. It's like an instantaneous black hole if you can get the setup off right. And his other ultimate, Goblin, it's kind of cool. Makes you look like Robotnik. You do quite a bit of damage. It's nifty for split pushing, but you end up having zero presence at all in team fights, and you can't really get away with that in heroes. At level 13, again, pretty much only one option, quick release charge. This is what gives you the second charge for your Explodium bombs, or Explodium charges, which is what allows you to do the stun lock with your ultimate. You cast one E, then a second later you cast your ultimate, and then you cast another E almost immediately, and then your opponents, if you do it properly, will be stunned for 4 seconds, which is absolutely insane amount of AoE lockdown. Then at level 16, I generally get the turret storage, which allows you to place 4 turrets at once with a 1-second cooldown between them. This is good for AoE, or for area control, for jungling, just a little bit of additional DPS in team fights. Great for pushing, as they are surprisingly tanky. They absorb a lot of damage. And your other options here are pretty lackluster. Your W just is not good enough to focus talents on. Stone Skin, you don't want to be in the middle of fights anyway. You don't really need the extra tankiness, so go with the turret storage. And then level 20, again, hands down, miniature black hole. It increases the size of your Graviton Bomb by, well, Gravio Bomb by a ton, and it actually makes it relatively easy to hit. At level 10, it's a pretty small AoE, so if you don't have a good setup for it, it becomes very hard to hit. However, with that level 20, you pretty much cover the entire screen with your bomb. So unless they are absurdly spread out to a point that it's counterproductive for them, you're going to catch a good number of people, and you're going to have a big impact on the fight.
So it seems like you're going to be focusing on building up your turrets so you can jungle or push a lane a little bit easier, and then later, once you have your ultimate, you're going to come to a team fight with those buff bomb charges and just roll house.
Yep, that's the plan.
Sweet, so now that we know how to set Gazlowe up with his talents, how do you actually use them in the game?
Well, he's a weird hero because he's not really good at fighting enemies until he gets to the big 5-on-5 team fight kind of situations where his ultimate and his AoE stuns actually kick in. So early game, you're going to be looking mostly to jungle. He can jungle from level 1 with his turrets against the siege giants. You can't fight knights until probably about a level 7, depending on who's helping you out. So you're going to want to go and take whatever siege giants you can right away. And then once you get in lane, you're basically just pushing. You're spamming your turrets, you're using your death laser to clear waves, and you're just trying to push down towers as quickly as you can. You don't really contribute too much to fights unless you can be really set up beforehand. If it's like Cursed Hollow, you can get there really quickly. You can set up a bunch of your turrets for area control. Then you're pretty effective. But otherwise, both your W and your E have big wind-up times. They're very easy to avoid, very easy to minimize, and obviously he does about 0 right-click damage. So he's just not contributing too much unless he's set up beforehand. So really focus on jungling and pushing in the early game. Once you get level 10, you can start coming to team fights. Preferably you have a setup for it. Preferably you have like an ETC or at least a tanky hero like a Muradin to just jump in and cause everyone to gather up, and then you can try and get off your stun bomb combo. If you don't have that set up, it's very difficult to land. It's a pretty small radius at level 10, but it is still disruptive. It forces the enemy to spread out and just disorients them in the team fight, which is pretty helpful for you. And this is the period of the game where you're weakest. In that mid-game, you don't really do too much. It's harder for you to be objective-focused, but you really don't kick into team fights until level 20. But then, once you get level 20, if you survive until that point, the Graviton Bomb upgraded mini black hole, or whatever it's called, is just absolutely gigantic. It covers most of the screen. It's just completely game-breaking if it's used well, especially if you have any other kind of AoE to stack on top of it. Then, from the other end of it, how to deal with Gazlowe. Like I said, he doesn't want to fight early on. If he disappears, he's jungling. Just send one of your assassins to go deal with him, especially if you have a Zeratul. Zeratul is almost a counter to Gazlowe in how well he deals with solo greedy junglers early on. As he's pushing, ideally you have a counter push kind of hero or someone who can at least just match up against a Mayo Witch Doctor to keep spamming his spells from a safe range and not have to deal with his stuff. Just dealing with the pushing or forcing 5-man fights early on, because he doesn't want to come to 5-man fights. So if you can force fights, you either take a 5v4 or you fight him in the capacity that he just doesn't really do much at that point. So try and punish his early game, punish his lack of presence. And then as it gets into the mid game, he still doesn't do too much. Watch out for the bomb combo. Make sure you don't get caught in it if you can at all avoid it. But keep in mind, he doesn't do too much else. So you're pretty okay 5 versus 5 at that point. Come level 20, though, you really don't want a 5 versus 5. If at all possible, at that point, you want to split the game, spread the game out, go for split pushes, go for pickoffs. Just do anything you can to avoid a straight-up 5v5 fight. because that is where he reigns supreme. But that's still pretty much all he can do. So if you can mitigate that, you mitigate him. So just try and play around him.
And there you have it, guys. But remember, this is our best way to play, and we want to hear yours in the comments.
Be sure to head over to Greg's Twitch channel for more pro tips, and for everything Heroes of the Storm, stay tuned to IGN.